sitting here with somebody who's really got a passion for the wine industry, and she's taken that passion and she's focused it on a couple of different areas. I'm going to give her an opportunity to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her background. Tilar.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. My name is Tilar and yeah, I write on wine. I'm an English professor up at Cork'd College in Maine, and but for a long time I lived in Sonoma. And when I lived out there and first moved to the area, I spent the weekends out wine tasting. And of course, in the beginning, you go to the really commercial places, and but eventually you start noticing that there are these little signs along the road, and they just say winery open and have an arrow. And so I thought, I wonder what these back lane wineries are, and started really getting a passion for going and visiting small places, family owners, talking with the winemakers. And at some point I realized it was actually kind of hard to find these places, and realized there really should be a guidebook to it, because unless you were a local, it would be very, very difficult to find these places. So that was how the series of the backline wineries of Napa and Sonoma got started. Also written a book on champagne history called The Widow Clicquot, because that was my favorite champagne. So yeah, I just had been really into wine for a long time seriously, and decided to finally start writing about what ended up being a lot of knowledge in the end.
So your first book was The Widow Clicquot.
That's right.
And then it was followed up by the Sonoma, the book focusing on Sonoma.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then recently you've moved on and you've covered Napa. And I talked a little bit about the inspiration behind that, because they're two little bit different areas, and obviously you said you started in Sonoma.
Yeah. Well, it is really different because I mean, in some ways it's not as different as you think. Everybody has the idea that Napa is totally glitzy, that there aren't any small places, and Sonoma has a more laid-back reputation. And I admit that having lived in Sonoma for a long time, when I started the Napa book, I had that same idea. But it turns out that there are actually lots of very small family, boutique producers in Napa. So in that sense, Napa is not nearly as glitzy or commercialized behind the scenes as it appears at first. But the way that I usually describe the difference between Napa and Sonoma is that Sonoma is like a beach town in summer. It's a little bit blue jeans and flip-flops, it's pretty laid back. And Napa is like a ski town in season. So, it's that same kind of, fun vibe, but it's a little bit more energy.
Very cool.
That's the way I describe it.
Very cool. I like that. I like the analogy. I know there are a lot of names in these books, and there are so many of these boutique small wineries that you do a great job of covering. I guess start with Sonoma. What are a couple of your favorites? If somebody's going to the Sonoma area and they don't want to look at the big commercial giants, what are a couple of the names they should look for?
Yeah, the way that the book, just to explain a little bit about who's in the book and how I selected them. So everybody in the book is not commercially owned. That was my number one criteria is, if someone's got a corporate budget, they've got plenty of advertising, it's not the kind of place that they're going to have distribution, you're going to find their wines on your grocery store shelf. And so what I wanted was small, family-owned places that had really limited distribution, so that when you went out there, you could come back with something and nobody else was going to have it, because it really was it's sold directly from the winery, most of it. Everybody in the book has under 30,000 case production, but almost everybody in both of the books is under 10. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 people in each book that have 30,000. And when you think that some of the big producers in both Napa and Sonoma make 1 million cases a year, you get a sense it's just a completely different scale. So the thing I love about Sonoma is that within one county there's huge diversity of winemaking styles. So it kind of depends what you want. I mean, if what you want is a Pinot Noir or a Sauvignon Blanc, you go to the Russian River Valley. If what you want is Zin, or if you want some there's a lot of Côte d'Orléans styles being planted up in the Dry Creek. So, for example, up in the Dry Creek, the Hawley family, Paul Hawley, the way I met him, Paul Hawley did the photos for the book, but it didn't start out that way. Originally, I was going to do the photos, and his dad, John, and he and his brother, Austin, are are the winemakers for the Hawley family winery. And I went in one day when I was working on the book, and I met him, and I saw his photos, and I'm like, oh no, you need to do the photos. You're a better photographer than I am. So he's great. Also up there is, within 2 or 3 miles of each other, there's the Zucchini family, makes a great Zinfandel. I really like Null. They do some fabulous stuff. Trying to think. De la Montagne is just a little bit further out. So Mick Unti and his dad George are making some. He's working really closely with some Côte Rhone varietals. So that's that's the Dry Creek.
Yeah, the names you just mentioned, unfortunately, probably 99% of the people who are watching this will never have heard of. But I'm sure their wines are equally impressive with some of the larger names that everybody's familiar with. Top over to Napa.
Yeah.
Talk about some of the wineries that you discovered while you were traveling through there during the second book.
Right. And it's the same thing, in Napa, a lot of the big commercial places are right along, the strip on St. Helena Highway, or, a little bit over on the Silverado.
Sure.
But if you get up in the mountains of Napa, either Howell Mountain, like there's Ladera up there, Summit Lake, forgetting the name of the guy right next to Summit Lake right now, whole bunch of places up there. Also on Spring Mountain, which is the mountain that's between Napa and Sonoma. So Fiona Barnett, she makes a fabulous wine up there. Barnett Family Vineyards are great. And then also on the valley floor, tucked away, some places that look like houses, because they are somebody's house. And so you think, oh, that's just a residential house. No, it's actually somebody's vineyard that's been in the family. So, for example, the folks at Shy Poke they might make a couple hundred cases a year, but they're one of the few people making a Charbonneau, which has been planted. It's known as Calistoga Gray, right? So it's been planted in Northern California for generations and generations, and it's a kind of really special varietal that you wouldn't get a chance to try otherwise. And their families own that piece of property for 3 or 4 generations, so it's just their house, So it's great.
Very cool. Well, I can't thank you enough for kind of talking with us a little bit today and bring to light some of these wineries that people otherwise maybe wouldn't know about.
Yeah.
So hopefully anybody